whatever happened on these operations, kids ended up dead.
These are allegations of straight murder.
Culture of omerta within special forces.
The allegations that have been presented to me are horrific.
Did members of Britain's most elite army unit, the Special Air Service, murder unarmed civilians and prisoners of war in Afghanistan? That's the question being asked behind me in the public inquiry. Joining me to discuss this is my colleague Richard Norton-Taylor, who's been following the inquiry inside.
The SAS are protected by a kind of wall of silence, really, and now that wall has been broken.
Richard, can you tell us about the evidence you've heard this morning from the Veterans Minister, Johnny Mercer?
He was an officer, worked with the Special Forces in Afghanistan, and a lot of people, a lot of his fellow officers told him things.
Rumour or gossip was being provided to you which involved the engagement of people who did not pose a threat.
Yeah.
And was that an engagement that led either to the injury or death of individuals who did not pose a threat?
Yes.
Children had been hurt during the course of these operations, and that had been a trigger point for members of the Afghan partner unit in not wanting to work with UK SF1.
That was one trigger that was raised with me.
The inquiry is seeing is emails from soldiers, from special forces, discussing some of these concerns about weapons being planted on civilians after they've been shot dead.
Weapons are being planted, what they call this phrase called dropped weapons, which means you put a weapon, which is not a NATO weapon, which is probably, it could be a sort of AK-47, something that, say, the Taliban in Afghanistan could have used. You drop it by someone after he's been shot to show, in quotes, i.e. to back up your allegation, your lies, that this person posed a threat.
It would appear, after my time, that it became practice for some units to take these on the ground in order to, well, I don't know why you would do it, but if I was to go down that line, it would be so that you could place them with unarmed combatants or unarmed individuals.
Because if a photograph was taken, it would give the impression that that dropped weapon had been held by that person, and therefore might allow somebody to say he was armed, presented a serious threat to life, and therefore he was engaged.
Indeed, Mr. Glasgow.
Right. And this was a first-hand allegation made to you by a member of the UKSF.
Correct.
You can see the anguish, really, in this guy, Johnny Mercer, who's the Veterans Minister now. He does not want to land his old mates, as it were, to be accused of being whistleblowers and so on. The inquiry got very angry about this.
Insofar as those numerous individuals are concerned, they were friends of yours?
Yep.
And presumably still friends of yours?
Yep.
And are you able to provide their names to the inquiry, please?
Not at this stage, no.
Mr. Mercer, I'd like you to reflect on this
I will, of course,
aspect, sir. If you'd be so kind. It's important that we have all the evidence.
For people who aren't familiar with Johnny Mercer, he's very much carved his political career by portraying himself as a champion for veterans who are victims of witch hunts by left-wing lawyers.
That's right.
He, helped to pass this legislation which makes it much harder for people who have been victims of human rights abuses by the British Army to bring claims in the courts in the UK.
I came into my position as the Minister for Veterans Affairs, ending the vexatious nature of the pursuit of veterans through lawfare, whether it was Northern Ireland, Afghanistan, Iraq, was a major campaign of mine. There was always the inherent risk in batting for them that something horrendous was going to come out.
Here he was admitting that he himself had heard rumours and allegations from within the troops that serious human rights abuses were being perpetrated by British forces in Afghanistan.
In some ways, I wanted to go in and see evidence that would disprove these allegations, so that because these allegations are horrific, no one wants to believe they're true. Have we investigated it properly? Are we going to look stupid in 3 or 4 years' time? If we bring in this legislation, everyone says we're covering up abuses. Are we actually doing that inadvertently?
Did there reach a point where you were satisfied that you got to the bottom of it?
No, it's only ever got worse.
And when you
to
say
this day.
And when you say worse, what do you mean by it's only ever got worse?
I have been desperate for some sort of evidence to disprove these allegations because I don't want to believe them. I don't want to believe them of that unit. I have friends in that unit. I have friends who were killed on operations. I have friends who were never the same person again after Afghanistan. And I don't want to believe it. And so at every stage I've tried to find something to disprove these allegations, but I've been unable to.
When he sought assurances from senior Special Forces commanders that these allegations were untrue, he found their responses unconvincing.
Full motion video became a statutory requirement to conduct these operations after a particular operation in, I believe it was around 2006, that didn't go too well. It is literally a go, no-go criteria. It was simply not plausible to try and ask me to believe that there was nothing available for each of these 10 operations selected at random.
Can I ask about the conversation or conversations you had about this subject with the Director of Special Forces?
Yeah, I mean, I said to him, where is this stuff? I want to bat for you, I want to help you. Where is this stuff? I remember he leant back and went like that.
We in Declassified and one or two others have been pushing for much more openness in the SAS, who've literally got away with murder. They're put on a pedestal. You can't talk about the special forces because otherwise you'll endanger national security, secret operations and so on. Well, that claim that's being bashed, punctured.
When you told the Secretary of State that you didn't believe the Director of Special Forces or the Chief of the General Staff, what did you tell him you didn't believe?
I think my words were, something stinks. We were being asked to carry political risk for bringing in legislation that was clearly contentious, and that eventually, when all is said and done with all these issues, the names on the tin for all this stuff come back to the ministers. And it would be me, predominantly, and Ben Wallace, whose names would be around this legislation. And ultimately, if this played out and the legislation came in and we protect all these people from lawfare, but also it was then shown that we couldn't investigate serious allegations like this taints the legacy of what I've done.
Northern Ireland, of course, is another current case where you have old incidents, or incidents that happened quite a long time ago, which the government wants to actually put under the carpet and say no more, let truth and reconciliation, have no more trials, which is still causing a problem and serious opposition by all sides, or both sides, I should say, nationalists and unionists in Northern Ireland, who've wanted to have what they call justice for victims of British Army shootings in Northern Ireland, and of course unionists would say of victims of IRA killings as well. So it's a live issue in Northern Ireland as well, in spite of the Minister of Defence and the government's attempt, and Johnny Mercer's attempt in particular, to shut all these inquiries down in Northern Ireland.
Absolutely, and our colleague Anne Cadwallader has been doing excellent coverage of those legacy cases, as they're called, in Northern Ireland, and Richard is here covering the public inquiry into the SAS alleged murders in Afghanistan. Thank you, Richard. People can read your article and other articles about the inquiry on our website.